I've never told this story publicly before, and to be honest, only the few people involved even know about it. I'm going to leave names and locations out, but if the people that were there somehow ever hear this, they'll know who they are because it was such a strange experience. This happened when I was 14. It was the summer before I started high school, and like every summer before that since I was 10, I went to the same summer camp on a lake in the mountains. It wasn't too far from home, only about an hour and a half from where I lived, but it always felt like its own little world, and I absolutely loved it there. I really looked forward to it all year. That year felt a little different though, right from the start. I remember getting off the bus and seeing a new group of kids who hadn't been there in previous years. They were from a town that was about 20 minutes from mine, and I immediately noticed one of the girls. She was with two other girls and they all seemed to be best friends. My first thought was she was cute, like really cute. I remember thinking she was one of the most attractive girls I had ever seen at that point in my life. Something about her just hit me and it was an instant crush. Over the next few days, I would see her around during activities and meal times, and I couldn't take my eyes off of her. But one of the days during swim time at the lake, my friends and I were in the water by a dock and randomly next to her and her friends. We ended up talking to them a little, all kind of joking around, and we even splashed them because they were taking forever to fully get in the water. It was really nothing, but it was enough that I felt like maybe I'd have a chance to talk to her again. After that, I couldn't stop thinking about her. In the dining hall, during camp games, whatever we were doing, I was just distracted. I had this ridiculous teenage crush, and it took over my whole brain. I couldn't focus on anything else. A few nights later, we had unusually warm weather. It was one of those nights where even after the sun goes down, it still feels heavy and hot in the air. One of my best friends and I decided to sneak out of our bunks after lights out and take our sleeping bags up to this rock outcropping on the edge of camp to lay out and look at the stars. It wasn't that far away from our bunkhouse, probably a 10-minute walk through the trees, but we had to cut through the girls' bunkhouses that were on the opposite side of camp, which was a little sketchy and we really didn't want to get caught over there. We made it up to the top and laid there for a while, just talking about stuff and listening to night sounds, and I was really happy to be at camp. After maybe an hour, my friend said he was getting tired and was going to head back. I told him I was going to stay for a little longer and that I'd be down in a little bit. Maybe 10 minutes after he left, I saw something that I still can't explain or even describe, but I'll try my best. I was lying on my back looking straight up at the sky when something caught my eye coming over the trees behind me. It was completely silent and it just hovered into view above me. From underneath, it looked like the shape of a raindrop if you were to draw one on paper, kind of thin and pointed in the front and rounded and wider in the back. The underside of whatever it was glowing, but not like a normal light. It honestly looked like liquid light that was swirling around, almost like if you looked at a light that's underwater. There were no flashing colors or anything, it was just a soft white glow. I watched it go directly over me, and I could see it as clear as day because there wasn't a cloud in the sky and it wasn't that high up. If I had to guess, it couldn't have been more than about 500 feet in the air. It passed over me, then over the lake, where I could even see its reflection on the water, then it disappeared over a hill on the other side of the lake. I didn't hear a single sound from it the entire time, and then it was just gone. I sat up completely stunned, and weirdly, it wasn't scary to me at the time at all. The only thing I could think after seeing it was how stunningly beautiful it was. In fact, I remember feeling an almost spiritual sensation. The whole experience was so incredible that I didn't even know what to think about it. Just seconds after it had gone over the hill and out of sight, I started to hear footsteps walking up the trail behind me. Initially, I panicked, thinking it was going to be a counselor coming up and I was going to be in trouble for leaving the bunkhouse after lights out, but when I turned around, it wasn't a counselor. To my complete astonishment, it was the girl I'd had a crush on all week, and she was just randomly walking up the trail by herself. She walked right up to me, smiled, and asked what I was doing up there. I told her very nervously that my best friend and I had snuck out to watch the stars and that he had already gone back to our bunkhouse. She asked if she could stay for a little bit and watch the stars with me. I mean it when I say I could barely speak to this girl. I just nodded and said yeah, like a goofy teenage boy. I turned my sleeping bag toward her so we could both sit on it, and we sat next to each other looking up at the sky. I was so anxious I didn't even know what to talk about, but after what felt like forever, I told her what I had just seen in the sky. I tried to describe it to her, telling her about the shape and what the light looked like underneath, but I was also trying not to sound like a weirdo. She listened to the whole story and said she wished she would have come up a few minutes earlier so she could have seen it too. After telling her the story, it kind of broke the ice and I relaxed a little. We spent the next hour talking about school and music and the things we like to do, just normal stuff. She was so easy to talk to and so sweet that I didn't even feel nervous anymore. It was one of those rare moments where everything seems perfect, like you're in a movie. I don't know what time it was, but at some point she stood up and said she should probably get back down to her cabin before it got too late. I agreed and said that I should do the same thing and started rolling up my sleeping bag. Before she left though, she told me it was really nice watching the stars together, which made me feel actual butterflies in my stomach. Then she looked up at the sky and said something kind of odd. She said, "There's more going on up there than you will ever know, but someday you will." That last part kind of shocked me. I think I said something dumb like, "Yeah, I think so too," and then she walked back down the trail, but I didn't know what she meant by that. I couldn't tell if she was talking about space or some kind of religious thing or just life in general. Whatever she meant, it caught me off guard, but I stayed there another few minutes just thinking about how awesome the whole night had been. It all felt surreal, but in the best way. Eventually, I picked up my sleeping bag, walked back down the hill into my bunkhouse, and finally went to bed. In the morning, the very first thing I did was tell my friend everything that had happened after he left. I was beyond excited, and I thought maybe something was happening between this girl and me. He was obviously skeptical because it was such a crazy story, but once he could tell I was being completely honest, he was excited for me. I was on cloud 9 and I couldn't stop smiling, but then things got weird. That morning at breakfast, my friend and I had just finished eating and we were walking our plates back to the kitchen when I saw her again. She was walking into the dining hall and passed right next to us with her two friends. I immediately smiled at her and said hi, but she looked at me like I was a complete stranger. She gave me this half-assed hey and kept walking like she didn't want anything to do with me. I thought maybe she was embarrassed in front of her friends, but later that day at the lake during swim time, I tried to talk to her again. I jokingly asked if she had gotten any sleep. She just looked at me weird and said, "Yeah, why? Were you spying on me or something?" I got extremely embarrassed because her friends and my friends were all standing right there. All I could do was say out loud that we had been up on the hill together and talking the night before, and her whole face changed when I said it. She said she had no idea what I was talking about and didn't go up on any hill with me. Then to top it off, she added that it would be creepy if she did do something like that with me. I could hear her friends quietly laughing, and I was mortified. I felt like an idiot, and to this day, I have never been so humiliated in my entire life. Just remembering it makes me cringe. Later that night, I told my best friend the whole story a second time, swearing to him that I wasn't making it up. He asked me if I could have fallen asleep after he left and dreamt the whole thing. I actually laughed out loud when he said that because it was so far from reality. I was wide awake, and I'm positive it all happened. If anything, I was on a natural dose of adrenaline because of everything that happened right in a row. The rest of the week at camp was awful, and I went out of my way to avoid her. I felt embarrassed and confused, and honestly, really hurt. I just wanted to forget it ever happened and go home. That was the last year I ever went to summer camp. 5 years later, I was 19 and a freshman in college. I just happened to be going home for a weekend and driving through the town just before mine, and I stopped at a Jamba Juice for a smoothie. As soon as I walked in, I noticed that the girl working behind the counter looked familiar. When I walked up to the counter, I could tell that she recognized me too, and right away she said, "Hey, I think I remember you," then brought up summer camp when we were 14, and I immediately remembered. It was her. I nodded and laughed a little, and the only thing I said to her was, "Oh yeah," and that I still miss going to camp sometimes, but it was really uncomfortable. I think she could sense that I was feeling weird about seeing her again, so she went straight to the point. She said she remembered being rude to me back then and didn't know why, because she wasn't usually like that. I told her it was a long time ago and that it was no big deal, but she apologized and said it was only because I had made up the story about the two of us getting together at night and it wasn't true. Being older and not caring about it as much, I kind of got upset when I heard that and I called her out on it. I told her that we did hang out one night and for a whole hour up on the hill. She stood there and swore it wasn't her and that I had to be thinking of someone else. I told her it was fine and that it didn't matter anyway. Then it got awkward and I walked away from the counter until my smoothie was done. When I got back in my car, I just sat there. I was thoroughly confused and wondered what had actually happened at camp that night. I would say she was straight up lying about it, but seeing her so genuinely sure it didn't happen made me question myself. I could tell she really meant it and really didn't know what I was talking about. It brought back all the memories of that experience, the good and the bad. I can still clearly remember every detail though. Sneaking out to look at the stars with my best friend, then seeing that unbelievable thing in the sky, and almost more amazing than that, spending a full hour sitting next to this girl I had such a huge crush on. There's no way that didn't happen. Then I thought about what she had said to me before she walked away, how there is more going on up there than I'd ever know, and that someday I would. What was that about? There's part of me that wonders about something else too. When I think back about her randomly showing up that night just seconds after seeing whatever I saw in the sky, I get this really odd feeling. If she's being honest with me, which I think she is, and she really didn't come up the hill that night and sit with me, then who was that? This happened a few years ago on March 24th, 2022. I was 16 years old and had just recently gotten my license. My friend's family was taking a day trip to the coast, Pacific City in Oregon to be specific, so a group of us decided that since I had my license and a new-to-me car, we would all load up in my Nissan 300ZX, take the T-tops off, and head to the coast to meet up with them. The weather couldn't have been nicer for early spring, and it was a fun first trip other than the discomfort of having 4 guys crammed into a small coupe for a 2-hour drive. We eventually made it to the coast and had a great day. Later that evening, we packed up the few things we brought with us and started heading back home. As we were leaving, one of my friends suggested we take a scenic back road that he knew instead of the main highway. The road he wanted to take is called the Nestucca Access Road for anyone familiar with the Tillamook Forest area. It would add an extra 45 minutes or so, but he said it was a really beautiful road and it'd be a nice change of pace, so we all agreed. The sun was setting and this road cuts through incredibly thick Pacific Northwest rainforest and steep hills, so it got dark really quickly. Before we knew it, we were deep into the coastal range. We had no cell service, there are no houses out there, only occasional campgrounds, and the road was empty, which is pretty typical for the mountain ranges between the Oregon coast and the valley, so none of us were worried about anything. About 10 miles in, we saw a green SUV that was either an early 2000s Dodge Durango or a Ford Escape, towing a camper that had crashed off the side of the road. I couldn't tell how long it had been there, but since no one was around in either direction, I decided we should pull over and see if anyone needed help. The wreck was probably only 8 to 10 feet off the paved road, but on a steeper slope, and the only reason it hadn't gone down the slope was because it was caught by the trees it had run into. When we got out to check it out, we walked up to the camper first and it was absolutely trashed. Both of the sidewalls were caved in, and the contents of the RV were scattered around it and all the way down the hillside. The SUV was full of clothes and food, and almost all of its windows were shattered. There were some pretty significant bloodstains on what was left of the driver's side door glass and the windshield, but given how bad the crash looked, it seemed to fit. The weird thing was there was no one in or near the vehicle, and we even called out into the woods to see if anyone could hear us or needed help. We were there checking it out for quite a while and not really sure what to do when a truck eventually came down the road and stopped next to where we were parked. We told the driver we hadn't seen the accident happen and were just going to head out until we could get cell service to call it in. He said he would do the same thing, and shortly after he left, we started back on the road. It was a really weird experience and completely unexpected, and after driving away, we all just had this weird feeling about being back there. We also had to drive pretty slowly because the road conditions get worse and worse as you make your way through the range. While it is paved, there are huge potholes and cracks everywhere because it's not maintained like the main road, and it's definitely not a road you want to drive fast on, especially in a low sports car like mine. About 5 miles after we left the crash, we came to a pretty sharp right-hand turn that had a gravel pull-off area at the apex with tall grasses around it. As we came around the corner and my headlights lit up the trees behind the pull-off, I saw something. I literally did a double take, but what I saw looked like a pale human figure with saggy hanging skin standing in the grassy area. From what I could tell, this thing was fully naked and had no clothing of any kind on. It looked like it was somewhat hunched over behind the tall grass, but I could only really see from its stomach up. With my headlights fully on it, I could see it had no hair anywhere on its body, and its face almost reminded me of an old man that was just staring directly at my car. I couldn't make out any prominent facial features, which was extremely disturbing, but what I remember the most were the eyes. They were unnaturally large and reflected my headlights brightly, just like a cat's eyes would do. And as we passed it and made the turn, we could all see his whole body turn to keep looking at us. It was hands down the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life. I didn't know what to think or what to do, and my friends in the car were all staring behind us as I kept my eyes on the road and picked up speed, and all 3 of them said they saw it come out of the grass and onto the gravel to watch us drive away. To say we were all freaked out would be an understatement. Being back on that road at night and alone and seeing something like that was terrifying. Once we felt we were a safe distance from whatever it was, we started talking about what we had just seen. I was trying to drive and calm down and think rationally all at the same time. My friends started throwing out theories of it being some tweaker or crackhead in the woods, or maybe it was the guy who crashed his SUV and camper and he had wandered off and was physically messed up. Then, of course, there was some talk of it being something else. Something paranormal or not from around here, if you know what I mean. In the moment, I kind of played it off like it had to be some kind of person, but the more I thought about it, the more I knew that was not the case. We had all gotten a crystal clear view of it at a very slow speed, and whatever we had just seen looked like something you'd see in a liminal space video or a scary AI-generated image. Completely hairless, reflective animal-like eyes, and horribly pale, saggy skin that looked like someone who had lost hundreds of pounds. Personally, I wanted nothing more than to get out of the woods and off that road, so we sped home as fast as I could safely drive and didn't talk about it much after that. Once we got back into cell range, one of my friends called in the accident we saw and gave them all the information that we had, but we never heard anything else about it after that. I guess they had already gotten a call about it, so we weren't the first ones to see it. There's one more strange piece to this whole story. Almost a year later, in July of 2023, my then-girlfriend's brother and I were hanging out a lot, and one night he and I and one of his friends were driving around on dirt roads around Dixie Mountain, which is maybe 45 minutes northwest of Portland. At some point, we started telling scary stories about sightings and ghosts and things like that, and I ended up telling them this story. As soon as I brought up the crash we'd seen, his friend chimed in and said he had seen the same exact crash around the same time and even showed me a picture on his phone of the SUV. The only difference was he didn't see or experience anything weird or creepy like we did. He said he would have absolutely freaked out if he had seen what we did because he had been driving that road alone. Looking back, I couldn't even begin to tell you what we saw on that road, but it scared the hell out of me and my friends, and none of us will ever forget it. I haven't been back on that road since it happened, nor do I have any plans to be. The picture I have of that thing in my head, which is really all I can call it, will forever be burned into my memory. I thought I'd share my story just to see if someone else out there has ever seen anything similar or had a weird experience in that same area. I guess at the very least, it'd be nice to know whatever happened with that wrecked SUV and camper, and if whoever wrecked it was okay. My husband and I are in our early 60s. We're really lucky and were able to recently retire from work, and now we spend most of our time doing things outside. Our favorite things are hiking and backpacking together. Living out west has given us access to a lot of wilderness areas, and we take full advantage of it. In early September of 2024, we were on an extended summer trip in Montana and decided to spend a day hiking the Huckleberry Lookout Trail in Glacier National Park. We'd been to Glacier before, but we like to avoid the crowded trails and main attractions. We've always preferred places that are a little off the beaten path. Huckleberry isn't one of the most popular trails in the park, even during peak season, and by early September, especially on a weekday, it's pretty quiet. That's exactly what we were looking for. The day we hiked it, we got up early and drove out to the trailhead. It was a perfect late summer morning with temps in the low 50s and not a single cloud in the sky. I remember the small parking area being completely empty when we pulled in, which is our favorite thing to see. The Huckleberry Lookout Trail is just under 12 miles round trip, and it has a little over 2,500 feet of elevation gain, so it's not the easiest hike. It climbs pretty steadily almost the entire way up. The lower parts of the trail are more in the pine trees and bare grass, and as you gain in elevation, the trees start to thin out and the views are incredible. There's also a fire watch tower at the top. We planned on taking our time to just enjoy being out there, and we had packed a lunch to eat at the top. A few miles in, maybe around the halfway point, we started to notice something weird. There was a low hum or vibration that we could hear and feel. It wasn't a constant sound, it would kind of come and go, but when it was there, we both felt it. It wasn't super loud or unpleasant in any way, it was just noticeable. It almost felt like a low vibration in your chest and feet more than something you hear in your ears. We thought it might be some kind of work going on somewhere else in the park, but we couldn't place the direction, and it didn't really sound like machinery. I can't really describe it any better than saying it was just a strange sound. By the time we were about a mile from the top, the views were getting spectacular. You could see across the whole North Fork area with these huge swaths of forest below and small amounts of snow still hanging onto some of the peaks in the distance. We stopped at a small overlook area where the trail opens up and there was a flat spot, perfect for a short break, so we decided to take off our packs, drink some water, and enjoy the view for a few minutes before pushing to the top. Just as we were setting our packs down, we heard that sound again. It was probably the 5th time we had heard it, but this time it didn't fade in and out. It was steady and sounded stronger. I remember feeling it pretty strongly in my chest, and it reminded me of standing next to a large speaker at a concert, but without any actual direction you could pinpoint. It was so weird because it wasn't loud, it was just there. As we both stood there and looked out at the view and the forest below, we noticed something really odd. There was a large shadow on the trees down in the valley with clearly defined edges, and it was moving very slowly. My husband said it looked exactly like a shadow from a cloud in the sky, but the craziest part was the sky was completely clear. I'm not exaggerating when I say there wasn't a single cloud in sight. It had been a bluebird day since we started, and it still was. We both stood there looking up, then looking down at the shadow, then up again trying to find what on earth could be casting a shadow like that. It made no sense because there was perfectly blue sky in every direction. We watched the shadow slowly move across the forest for maybe 5 minutes, long enough that we were certain it wasn't some kind of optical illusion. It was a real shadow with edges. We stood there frozen and talking about what kind of natural phenomenon we could be seeing. Then it moved farther down the valley and eventually faded into the distance until we couldn't see it anymore. We must have looked up 100 times trying to find something that was blocking the sun over that large of an area, but we never saw anything. The shadow wasn't huge, but it was big enough that we could see it clearly from where we were standing, which was miles away. The shape of it wasn't a perfect circle or anything, but it was still clearly defined. Right after we lost sight of it, my husband realized that the sound was gone too. This made us wonder if the two things were connected somehow. After it was gone, we stood there for a few more minutes, staring at each other and almost laughing about it because it was just such an unexpected and strange thing. In the moment, we agreed that it had to be some kind of natural occurrence, and we just didn't know what that was, then decided to keep moving so we could get to the top and have lunch. Once we were nearing the top, we could see the fire lookout tower that sits up on this exposed peak with panoramic views in every direction. It's absolutely stunning up there. We ended up staying on the summit for over an hour. We ate lunch, took in the views, and talked a bit about what a nice day it was and what we had seen earlier. There was a really friendly woman working at the tower named Elizabeth, who we talked to for a little bit, but we didn't mention what we had seen. It just didn't feel like something you bring up in a casual conversation. The hike back down was long but equally beautiful. I always love out and back trails because the view going out is always different than going in, and it feels like two totally different trails. We only saw a handful of other hikers that day, which was nice too. But we couldn't stop talking about the shadow we'd seen. Over and over, we tried to come up with ideas and theories about what could have caused it. We've spent so much of our lives in the outdoors. We've seen northern lights, lenticular clouds hovering over mountains, light refractions that make short little rainbows in the sky, and even massive shadows that stretch for miles from the peaks we've stood on when the sun is going down behind us. But this wasn't like anything we had ever experienced. I really can't stress how weird it was. By the time we got back to the car, we were tired and dusty and ready for dinner, but we still hadn't come up with a logical explanation. All we could agree on were these three things. 1, we definitely both saw the same thing. 2, what we saw was a shadow being cast by something. And 3, there was absolutely nothing in the sky above it. Just for fun, I'll mention a few of the more out there ideas we tossed around during the hike down. One of them was it being some kind of stealth aircraft that was way up there. This one seems impossible to me because the shadow was far too big for anything like that, and we never heard a thing as far as jet engines go. Another one, and this might not even be possible, was a giant pocket of gas released from some vent in the ground. We thought maybe there could be a natural gas that, while we wouldn't see it in the air, could still cast some kind of shadow below. This one also seems impossible to me, but I'm no scientist. And one last one. Maybe, and I want to emphasize that word, maybe it was something else. Something that was checking out Glacier National Park like we were, but had a much longer trip to get there than we did. Nothing we experienced that day made us scared in any way or not want to go back. Glacier is one of the most incredible places we've ever been to, and I look forward to exploring a lot more of it. But I will tell you this. We have done hundreds, if not thousands, of hikes together over the years, and we have never seen anything like what we saw that day.